Hi, this is Robot here for ScooterWest.com. Today I'm going to show how to do the valve adjustment on this GTS 250. All the steps I'm going to show you also apply to the GT 200 or the newer 300. A couple things you'll want to get before you start with the valve adjustment. First of all, you probably want to replace a spark plug. Every 12,000 miles they recommend doing a valve adjustment. Every 6,000 you want to inspect the spark plug, but by about 12,000 miles you definitely want to change it. We recommend the NGK CR8 EKB, and it's the newer style dual electrode plug that's used on the 300s. You can also use it on the GT 200 and the 250. You're going to need 5 of these gasket rings here. Part number is 830249, and oftentimes they're not reusable. They get quite a bit compressed in the valve cover. You might also want to change out the actual valve cover gasket. It's a good idea. Don't really want to have it leaking. And that's 829536 is this part. And since you need to remove the muffler to drop the engine out, you may want to replace this part. That's a wear item that's on the Vespa. Exhaust bushing, probably read about it. We just recommend anytime you remove the muffler, you change this out. It's better than having it leak and make excess noise and possibly burn your brake line. 846097 is this part right here. Some of the tools you'll need to perform a valve adjustment or any of the more comprehensive, complicated services on the Vespa. You'll need a full screwdriver set. We have number 2, number 3 Phillips. You'll need a full 3/8 metric ratchet set, including a 5/8 spark plug socket, and also a T40 Torex driver for removing the muffler. A 1/4-inch socket set. Nice to have the swivel head 8mm and swivel head 10mm sockets in various sizes of extensions. A long pair of needle nose to pull the spark plug cap off. Sometimes you can get it off by hand. A magnet and a mirror. Full set of open and close in combination wrenches, and also it's helpful to have the ratcheting metric wrenches. If you need to replace exhaust bushing, you want to have a large mallet to drive the new bushing in. And some of the tools we sell, in order to make the job much easier, when installing the exhaust bushing, you'll need to expand the header pipe that the bushing goes into. And this part number is Tool EX, and it expands the pipe size there so you can fit the new bushing. This is much smaller than a lot of the automotive ones. And to do the actual valve inspection and adjustment, you need some type of feeler gauge. We sell these type, much easier to use than the index style that you find at auto parts store. And this is tool valve. If you're replacing a spark plug, you want to get some dielectric grease. You can find it in much smaller sizes at your local auto parts store. You may want to replace the hose that goes between the valve cover and the air box. It's the breather hose. Oftentimes they'll crack kind of right at where they attach to the joints. Part number on this is a 844094. And Piaggio uses a one-time use hose clamp. You want to replace it with just a easier to use worm gear style clamp. And the part number on this is HCL6 Mini. And if you're replacing the hose, you'll need 2 of these. If you're reusing your hose, you'll just need one, the one that goes to the valve cover. Oftentimes, with higher mileage on the GTs and GTSs, spark plug cap wears out. And if the spark plug fits very loosely like this one does, you want to replace both the spark plug and the cap. The part number on the 90-degree cap that's used on these 200 through 300 cc Vespas is 293845-90. We're going to do the valve adjustment. The scooter's at 12,000 miles. This fine specimen belongs to Jammer, who works here at the shop. He rides it hard and puts it away dirty, so bear with the dirt, the dents, the scratches, and everything else. First, you want to take both side panels off. Under here is a 10mm or 6mm nut, needs a 10mm wrench. In the front there's a screw, so go ahead and take both those off. Next step is loosen the air box. There's 3 fasteners here. There's a screw right here, screw up here, and one that's hidden up here. There's a little bit longer of a screw. This one, there's going to be a nut on the back side, and you want to put your hand kind of in the back side and be prepared to grab the nut before it drops out when this unthreads. Next, you want to remove the muffler. Up at the header clamp, you want to loosen the large nut with a 17mm wrench, and there's 3 fasteners that retain the muffler to the wheel bracket, and they are T40 Torex star drives on there. One here, one down here, and one up here. So 3 of those need to be removed. Muffler pulls away from the bodywork. You can see there's your the bushing. If you're going to replace it, you want to use some type of screwdriver or something. You can actually grab it and pull it right out of there. Loosen the clamp a little bit more. You can see this muffler is kind of weathered. This would be a good time to wire brush it or sandblast it and put a coat of high temp paint, such as like the barbecue flat black that's available at Auto Parts Store or Home Depot. Next, we'll loosen the lower point for the shock. 17mm wrench or socket will do the trick. All right. Remove the spark plug cap. Pretty difficult to do on these scooters. You want to pull it straight off the spark plug cap or off the spark plug. If you get any angle on it, it's going to be really difficult to pull and may break the spark plug off. This spark plug cap is quite loose, so we're going to go ahead and replace it. You want to save the actual green rubber boot to it. Spark plug cap comes off by just unthreading it off the wire. And oftentimes it's easier to drop it through the bottom of the frame, the actual spark plug wire, and you can unthread the cap off and replace it. Since you'll be swinging the motor up, there's a couple things that will get a little tight. On the later ones, they have two throttle cables, but you want to pull the throttle cable out so it's got some slack here. This is your wiring that comes from the charging stator. Take it out of the clip so it's loose. The valve cover, this hose clamp's been replaced. You can remove this one with a flat blade screwdriver. It may have the original style one-time use hose clamp. You'll want to take a large pair of diagonal pliers and cut the hose clamp off. Sometimes these hoses are starting to get oily here. They have some cracking. Be a good time to change out this breather hose if it was leaking. In order to do the valve adjustment, we want to swing this whole motor up, and it's a little difficult to do it, at home. Here at the shop, we have a lift that clamps the front tire, and we put a scissor jack underneath. If you're doing this at home, you can make a makeshift wheel chock out of a piece of plywood and a couple 2x4s and some straps. If you look on YouTube, elsewhere you could find plans on how to build that type of setup. And you can use a regular automotive bottle jack to lift the center of the frame. So basically, the front will stay stationary, and we're going to lift the center of the frame. So as the center of the frame lifts, the motor's going to want to drop down once we have the shocks disconnected. We've already disconnected the shock on the right-hand side. Left-hand side, loosened the air box in an earlier step. 13mm head socket right here and a 17mm open-end wrench, and you can loosen this shock pivot bolt here. So pull that out. Keep in mind there's 2 spacers that go with the actual shock. May just want to thread the bolt right through to keep the spacers in place. And we'll disconnect the other shock. You may need to lift up on the motor a little bit. And you'll see as we jack the center of the frame up, the whole motor is going to want to drop down. And it's absolutely important that you have the spark plug disconnected and the cables and hoses that I showed in the previous step slackened up. So about right there is where you want to have it. Make sure nothing's hanging up. Kind of look at the cables. All right, we recommend changing the spark plug at 12,000 miles. and replacing it with the dual electrode plug lasts much longer than the single electrode plug that's found on the 250s and the 200s. You can see there's the plug actually goes up in this little well right here. Easiest way is to use a ratcheting wrench and 5/8 spark plug, and you'll be able to get in there and remove the spark plug. You see the gap's actually pretty large on this single electrode plug. It's kind of worn away. Good idea to change it out. And as with the cap, as I showed you in an earlier step, you could pull it down here and remove it. As you can see, you could have full access to the valve cover with the motor swung. There's going to be 5 fasteners that hold the valve cover on. 2 up here, 2 on the lower spot, and 1 over here on your left-hand side. Easiest way to do is use a short extension, 1/4 inch ratchet, and a swivel head 10mm socket right here, and you want to crack them all loose and go ahead and remove them all. All right, with all 5 fasteners removed, the valve cover will pull right off. Want to make sure it's pretty clean. You can see this one's clean enough. It won't allow any of the debris that's on the engine to fall into the valve cover here. Gasket, pull it out. You want to grease up this groove before you install the new gasket. All these screws are retained by the old ones here. You pop them off, and as you can see, these are a lot thinner than the new ones. You need to replace all 5 of these rubber gaskets here. All right, now that we have the valve cover off, we'll go ahead and check and adjust the valves. I have a whole cylinder head off of a scooter right here to show how to do it a little easier. It's a little difficult to do for the first time when you're doing it all through the access from the top of the scooter here. First, you want to take the belt cover off, and that's in order to turn the crankshaft over manually to get the scooter to top dead center on the compression stroke. On the actual upper cam sprocket, you want to look for a mark that says 4V, and that indicates 4 valve, which is with the GT200 through 300s, they have a 4 valve engine. There's also a 2 valve mark, which is used on the air-cooled 2 valve engines. I've painted the marks here so you can see them a little easier. You manually will crank the engine over until you get the 4V arrow pointing to the hash mark that's in between the 2 rocker arm pivots. In order to see this while the engine's in the scooter, you may want to use a mirror such as this. Kind of look for the mark and the tick on the top of the head here. And as long as it's close, it can be a tooth or 2 off on either way, and you'll be fine for adjusting the valves. But when you're assembling the engine, it needs to be exactly on the arrow or very close to the arrow. The intakes, which are on the top, if you're looking down at the motor, they're set the 4/1000ths of an inch or 1/10 of a millimeter. The exhaust, which are the ones that are the lower 2 valves, they are 6/1000ths or 1/1500ths of a millimeter is the factory specification for them. You take the feeler gauge and find the 4/1000ths and slip it between the top of the valve and the actual pin here, and you want it where it just drags just ever so slightly. That's the perfect adjustment there. If it's very difficult to push in and drags heavily, the valve is too tight. If it goes in with very little resistance, then the valve is too loose. And you go ahead and check both of them. Both these intakes are perfect, and we find that the intakes rarely go out of adjustment on these Piaggio 250 engines. They seem to hold adjustment on the intake valves for quite a long time. On the exhaust valves, on the other hand, they seem to want to go tight, about 12,000 miles. 6/1000ths feeler, you can see I cannot get this one in here at all. It's got a little bit of free play, maybe 2 or 3/1000ths, and that's a little bit too tight. Check the next one over. That one, it's a little on the tight side, but it actually does fit in there, and I'd leave that one alone. So in order to make the adjustment, you either want to take an 8mm wrench for the lock nut and a a short flat bladed screwdriver, and you can crack the lock nut. Leave the wrench on there, just crack it just where it's just loose. And we'll go ahead and loosen that a little bit, get the feeler gauge under there. Let's do this one. So now that the valve's a little bit loose, you should be able to fit that under there. It's a little on the loose side. Kind of hold some pressure down on the rocker to keep the feeler gauge in place. And go ahead and thread that, and just when it just contacts, that's right where you want to hold it. And you want to hold the flat blade screwdriver and go ahead and tighten the lock nut. And now the valve is perfectly adjusted. There's another tool for adjusting the valves. It's got a 12.8 millimeter socket built into it and a flat bladed kind of screwdriver adjuster, and these work pretty nice. You can crack it, kind of get a feel for where the adjustment is, and go ahead and tighten it. Works a little easier than using a separate wrench and a flat blade screwdriver. So both these are adjusted perfect now. Definitely want to keep on the exhaust valves, because if they close up to zero clearance, you're going to end up burning up the exhaust valve. Now that you got your valves checked and adjusted as necessary, reinstall the valve cover. Have all new rubber O-rings on these bolts here. You want to reinstall the belt covers. Also a good idea, every 6,000 miles you want to check the rollers and the pulley and clutch wear. And every 9,000 miles, Piaggio recommends that you change out the drive belt. So button up the belt cover, swing the engine back down. You can plug your, replace the spark plug, reconnect both shocks. You want to torque the 10 millimeter nuts to about 25 foot-pounds if you have a torque wrench. Reattach the air box. You may want to clean the air filter while you have the engine drop down. Much easier to get the air filter cover off when you have the engine drop down like this. And reconnect the cables, pop your throttle cable back in the clip, and same with the alternator wire. Make sure the scooter has oil in it, it's topped off, and go ahead and start the engine. And should be running like a purring kitten for the next 12,000 miles.